On April 30th, a heavily laden Dutch ship sailed into Chicago's bustling harbor. It was the first ocean-going vessel to travel the length of the newly opened St. Lawrence Seaway. The year was 1959. Today, ships from over 75 countries use the Seaway system. Stretching 3,700 kilometers from the North Atlantic coast to the center of the continent, this great inland waterway is as long as the Atlantic is wide. Since the early days of North American exploration and the Canadian fur trade, this chain of lakes and rivers has gradually evolved into a unique and inexpensive water transportation route. Prior to the completion of the Seaway, export and import commodities flowing between the continental interior and the nations of the world had to be transported by a combined water-land route that involved handling and rehandling. Now, vessels can move a ton of bulk cargo from Chicago to Liverpool for less cost than the overland freight charges to the East Coast. Machines, tools, grain, and a host of other goods are now shipped directly between the mid-continent and its trading partners. Normally, the coastal areas are the dominating region of a nation. In North America, however, it is the interior that dominates in agriculture, industry, population, and employment. This mid-continent area sustains a population of over 60 million people and produces, by volume, 2/3 of United States and Canada's export trade. Although the last ice age had left the continent with this natural marine highway, it was a diamond in the rough, for there were several turbulent sections located at key points that had to be overcome. The most formidable barrier of all, Niagara Falls, is now recognized as the honeymoon capital of North America, but it was no honeymoon for the trappers and voyageurs. Trading could be carried out only by those who were hardy enough to make the difficult portage around the falls and rapids and over the escarpment, for the Niagara River is the only natural connection between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie. When man needs a waterway where nature has failed to provide one, he builds a canal. Today, ships use the Welland Canal to traverse the 42 kilometers between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, bypassing altogether the Niagara River. The Welland Canal is considered the first segment of the Seaway to have been built. Because of an escarpment or steep slope which passes through the area, along with the natural inclination of the land, there's a difference in height between the two lakes of nearly 100 meters. This difference in water levels is overcome by 7 lift locks, or steps, in the canal, each with an average lift of over 14 meters. Because the capacity of a canal and its locks are determined by the size of the ships which will use it, the present system, the fourth to be constructed, is much larger than the original. Once an upbound vessel moves into a lock and is moored, huge steel gates close behind it. Valves are then opened, allowing water from upstream to flow by gravity into the lock. When the ship reaches the new level, the forward gates are opened and the vessel proceeds. About 91 million liters of water are required to fill the lock. For downbound vessels, the procedure is reversed.
Okay, thank you very much, Seaway Welland.
Although it takes about 33 minutes for a ship to lock through, the camera can compress the process into a few seconds. It was shortly after the War of 1812 that a young man, William Hamilton Merritt, returned to the Niagara area to go into business on a large scale. He was 19 years old. Before long, besides other interests, he owned and operated a flour mill and a lumber mill on the banks of the 12-Mile Creek, so named because it was 12 miles from the mighty Niagara River. Fluctuating water levels on the 12, especially during the dry summer months, plagued mill owners as they depended on water for power to turn the grinding stones of the mills. Mr. Merritt talked about the situation.
You and myself went out and did a rather primitive survey of the top of the escarpment and determined that, yes, it was possible to dig a drainage ditch from the Welland River to the edge of the escarpment, and then the water would flow down into Captain Dick's Creek and then into the 12-Mile Creek and provide an almost year-round supply of water for my mills and for those of my friends. Well, as I say, it did not take me long to realize the full magnitude of the potential of this drainage ditch. I saw that by merely widening it somewhat and making it somewhat deeper, providing some means of transporting ships up and down the Niagara escarpment, we could, in the shortest possible distance, unite the greatest extent of inland waters in the whole world.
Under rugged, hostile conditions, and with only the most primitive of means available, this unique individual with amazing vision, courage, and determination dedicated himself to the task. It was to become one of the great achievements of the century. The first Welland Canal was officially opened on a brisk November day in 1829. It was a significant moment for its proud young builder, William Hamilton Merritt, for people had scoffed at his vision of ships being lifted up over the escarpment. Merritt's Folly, they'd called it. This canal allowed ships to sail from Lake Ontario via 40 wooden locks into the Welland River and on to Chippewa, where they entered the Niagara River above the falls and then south into Lake Erie. Because the wind was not always favorable, these early sailing ships were usually pulled through the canal by oxen, mules, or horses along towpaths on either side. Upon reaching the Niagara River, treacherous currents proved dangerous, and it was deemed essential to push the canal through to Lake Erie at Port Colborne. During this construction period, hundreds of workers died from a cholera epidemic, to be buried not far from the deep trench which would, many years later, be called an amazing engineering feat. Despite increased canal usage, toll revenues were insufficient. Maintenance proved too costly, and the company realized serious financial problems. With the uniting of Upper and Lower Canada in 1841, the provincial government had a broader financial base and bought up the rights of the private canal company. Renovation of this essential waterway began. It was expanded to accommodate larger ships. The 40 wooden locks were reduced to 27 and made of stone from the nearby Queenston quarries. This second canal was completed in 1845. Plans were made for similar locks in the St. Lawrence River. Merritt had urged a uniform system of locks be used throughout the waterway. By 1848, 3-meter-deep navigation was possible from Lake Erie to Montreal. About this time, steamships began to appear more frequently, slowly replacing the beautiful sailing vessels. Several years later, in an interview with a newspaper reporter, Merritt discussed the project.
I decided to sanction my canal, not support it, mind you, but merely sanction it. I took the bit between my teeth and formed this private company and got to work on it.
What were the benefits of such a canal, both for your own personal gain and for the public?
Yes, well, of course, as the venture became larger, from the drainage ditch to the international canal, ship canal, which it was to become, the benefits became more wide-reaching as well, as opposed to just benefiting me and a few of my friends because of increased power, increased water supply for our mills. Now it became a source of prosperity for the province and indeed the potential nation. The prosperity began to work even from the turning of the first sod, which happened in late November 1824. And you know, it's not a coincidence that it happened at that point in the year. People have asked me, now why should you start to turn the sod on a canal at the beginning of winter when it's most difficult to dig? Well, the problem was there was no one around here that knew how to dig, at least not how to dig a canal, except for government engineers, military engineers, and they were not to be involved in this. This was a private venture. However, the Erie Canal, located in New York State, going all the way from Lake Erie to the Hudson River, was begun in 1817 and was nearing its completion in 1825. Therefore, it was very carefully planned that we should start work in late 1824 to take advantage of this surplus labor. In that first year, I brought over upwards of 600 of them and their wives and families. Now, there were fewer than 300 people in St. Catharines before that time, and therefore the canal in 1 year had tripled the population of that area. 600 workers, that their wives and families that had to be clothed and housed and fed, and 600 workers who were paid $10 a month each and every month. That's $6,000 in circulation, which hitherto had not been in circulation.
Mr. Merritt, how did you come about to finance such a venture? It must have cost a fortune.
I spent most of my time traveling about the hustings, going from village to village, hamlet to hamlet, public meeting to public meeting, knocking on doors, shaking hands, trying to raise money to build the canal. The government wasn't interested, so it had to be a private company. I had to raise £40,000 or $160,000 in that first year. And trying to talk people into parting with $50 for one share in the Welland Canal Company was like trying to pull hen's teeth. They were very reluctant to let go of it. And, you know, my problem was that I was not selling a commodity. I was trying to sell them an idea of their own future, of their own prosperity. And so I decided to go to a place where they had no vested interest in the canal or indeed in British North America, but they knew a good deal when they saw it. And I went to New York City, and in a matter of 2 weeks managed to raise £20,000. I feel it was a sad state of affairs that in the advanced year of 1824, for a piece of private Canadian enterprise, I had to go to the United States to obtain venture capital. And eventually I was to go to England and continue to knock on doors, both private and governmental, here in Upper Canada, in Lower Canada, back in the United States, and again back to England. It was a constant search for money. Oftentimes I felt that the canal ate money. I think eventually it was to cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 million as opposed to the $160,000 I thought it would cost originally. But money was a constant trial to me.
It was only through his persistence and tenacity that Merritt's canal was pushed through to completion. In addition to his Welland Canal accomplishments, Merritt, who was born in the United States, made many contributions to his adopted country. He encouraged the economic development of Canada and the development of the Soo Canal. He served as Canada's Commissioner of Public Works, was 7 times an elected representative in the legislature, and also helped build one of the early railroads. 2 years before his death in 1862, he watched as a stagecoach carried the governor of New York State across Merritt's newly constructed suspension bridge spanning the Niagara Gorge, thus linking the two countries. Merritt didn't live to see succeeding renovations to the Welland Canal. The construction methods used on the present canal, which was finished in 1932, are in sharp contrast to those used a century before.
We had no sophisticated equipment or machinery. 5 years of digging through alluvial earth, limestone, granite, with nothing more than picks and shovels and the muscles of men. We had a little black powder, but it really was not all that much use. Most of the earth was carried out on the backs of the men in bags, in sacks, old potato sacks or baskets or boxes, until we started to get a number of oxen and carts, but still they were never enough. Most of the earth was carried out by the individuals involved. And it was arduous, to say the least.
Today, the St. Lawrence Seaway Authority has a well-equipped traffic control center.
We'll get the buoy in about 20 minutes. I'll give you the particulars here.
Roger, go ahead with the particulars.
Every ship in the canal is monitored by means of television, radio, and an intricate telemetry system. Tape recordings and photographs taken every few minutes by an overhead camera of the control panel provide data used to improve and update dispatching procedure.
Sorry for the Arundel to come up now.
Roger.
Thank you, Bernie. It's Manitoula and Seaway, Welland.
Yes, sir. Is there some problem there with something?
Roger, have a breakdown there at the lower end. Be a while.
Okay, I'll get somebody on board there. I had them stand by. Okay, fine, thank you.
The tiny schooners of 1829 took 24 hours to transit the canal. Today's huge ships take only 12 hours.
Waiting for a call to go on the dock.
The pleasure craft Valhalla, the Valhalla, Seaway, Welland, over.
This is the Valhalla.
Yes, Valhalla, are all pleasure craft secured on the wall now, over.
During the first 100 years of its existence, traffic through the Welland had reached 6 million tons a year. The great culminating event in this saga of growth was the construction of the St. Lawrence Seaway. The immediate consequence of its opening in 1959 was that cargo traffic through the Welland increased to 30 million tons, and today is a staggering 66 million tons. It's difficult to assess the contribution of the Welland Canal to the booming economy and general prosperity of the continent's hinterland. Throughout its history, however, one fact stands out clearly. The Welland Canal, Merritt's Folly, has been and continues to be a vital artery connecting the major industrial areas of the North American heartland and a significant link with the nations of the world.